Hello and welcome to week 8 in behavior management in chapter 8, problem solving, which actually represents a sort of interesting juncture in the class. Up until now, we've been reviewing the principles of the ABC contingency theory, getting down, how those mechanisms work together. This chapter asks an important question, and that is the situation that you're dealing with you're thinking maybe you want to do a behavior plan about it, is it really a problem? Because it is going to be, when we implement a behavior plan, it is detailed, it is accurate, and it requires us to be very consistent in every aspect of that delivery of that plan, and it's hard to do. So we want to make sure that the situation we're dealing with is actually worth the effort that it's going to take to construct a really great behavior plan and implement it consistently and reliably over time in order to bring it about. Now, this philosophy was deeply ingrained to me when I took my sequence of courses in my undergraduate work in behavior management. There's a three-course sequence of learning about these things, and the professor had a story. It was a clinician that used behavior management techniques to help clients. So he was an active clinician. And he said that a parent showed up at his office complaining about the behavior of their teenage son. Now, the parents relayed that the son was continually slamming cupboards, slamming doors, and whatever, in just in being impatient or whatever, and it was driving them crazy. They had asked him to stop doing it. It was happening all the time and whatnot. And so the first step that this instructor told us that he did was he actually wanted an accurate portrayal of how often this was happening. What is the baseline for this behavior? And that baseline is going to determine whether our intervention is working. Is it decreasing the unwanted behavior, or is it inadvertently increasing? Are there patterns by which, in fact, there is a pattern? When you initially put a behavior plan in, the behavior tends to go up a little bit, and then it starts working. These are recognized patterns, and so getting that baseline, where is the behavior right now, was the first step in this process of validating the parents' concerns. He sent them home with homework to document every time that situation happened. Don't change a thing, just write down when it happens. They came back, I think it was, this is a long time ago. It might have been 2 weeks later. They came back, that 2 weeks baseline, and the behavior had happened a whopping total of 3 times. What had happened was the behavior was so irritating that the perceptions of the parents started to change and started to think this is happening all the time. But when they actually sat back and thought about it, they said, it's really not happening that often. I'm just getting really worked up about it. They then decided that 3 times every 2 weeks is probably not worth doing the work to address it, and decided that they did not need to intervene on this thing. I'm going to tell you that oftentimes when we want something to change, something is bugging us, something is going on, and we go through the process of getting a baseline to how often that actually happens, we are often surprised by how little it takes to push us to that point that we need to intervene. And we have to ask that question: do I want to go through the process of developing a plan accurately so it works? Dead man's test, stranger test, understanding the antecedents, developing consequences and whatnot, doing all of that, and then following through consistently for a period of time, tracking data. You have to count the data. You can't just implement the plan kind of thing. If you're going to go through all that trouble, it better be a problem that's worth your effort. So this chapter really focuses on that component, that question. So we ask ourselves, what is the baseline? This is, I'm going to introduce to you a experimental model. When we're looking at doing an intervention, whether it's a behavioral intervention, such as we're talking about in this class, or even a medical intervention, trying a person on a new drug for their particular illness or whatnot, what we have is an experimental design called ABAB. Now, what A and B stand for is A is a period of time in which we are just measuring the behavior. The B is a period of time where we're inserting the intervention. Then we take the intervention away, A, again, and then we introduce the intervention a second time. Now, this, of course, depends on what type of behavior you're looking at. Not all behaviors are appropriate for that kind of experimental method. But that first A, which is going to be required of you in the final, in the special assignment, it's get a baseline as to the current level of behavior that's going on. Now, I'll get into that a little bit in this particular lecture because I'm going to discuss the final special assignment with you. But we have that baseline, then we intervene and we measure what's happened when we've intervened. Did the behavior increase, decrease, remain the same? Then we take the intervention away. Now, presumably, the behavior would return to baseline. It may not, because the intervention may not have been the only thing that changed over that period of time. And we're really trying to make sure that our intervention is the thing that's going on, that is making the difference. An individual could have a baseline, be introduced to a new behavior under a behavior plan, remove the behavior plan, and the behavior just continues because they're now getting natural reinforcers for that. Great. Then you don't have to continue the behavior plan. Sometimes we can do that and things get worse over that period of time, and we have to contemplate, is this the result of I've put this behavior plan in, the individual doesn't like it, they're retaliating. You got to kind of like evaluate that objectively. You're not getting angry. It's perfectly understandable for someone to be angry and resentful when you put them on a behavior plan, but take that into consideration. Or is the behavior plan actually causing more problems than it's solving? And then thirdly, you might not see any change at all. You might have to evaluate, have I identified the behavior correctly? Have I understood the antecedents? Are the consequences something the individual is actually willing to work for and change their behavior? You evaluate all of those. This is something that you will be doing in the special assignment with your own behavior. But here we are in this chapter learning about that process of approaching behavior management in this experimental way. We get the baseline, we implement the intervention, then we take the intervention away, then re-implement and see if we're trying to increase a behavior and everything is working the way we had planned. We should see a level like this, and then we'll see a higher level, and then it'll go back down, and then on the next B, we'll see another level go up, and it can, maintains that behavior. Theoretically, that's what we should see. This is psychology. Things don't always work out the way we would like. But when we're doing this, we have to keep in mind we have a law of effect that we can actually consider. I mean, if a plan, quote unquote, is not working, I will almost guarantee it's been poorly designed. or the reinforcer is not a reinforcer, which I guess it's a function of not being well designed, or the behavior is not well identified, or the antecedents are there, the individual doesn't understand. There's something wrong with the design if you're not getting the results that you want. So we don't throw out behavior management, because it really is one of the most powerful tools we have for change. We have to look at what is going on in the plan in order to evaluate it. Now, what we're going to have, the tool I've given you basically to understand the ABC in terms of implementation is this graphic right here. So created this chart. I just created it. I actually created it in Keynote, like Apple's PowerPoint, and just created a table here. You need the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. We know the antecedent is all the circumstances leading up to this, but then the triggering event, what is going to trigger this particular behavior plan. And it could be, when I give you a handout, or every Monday and Wednesday, or when you're feeling angry, might be the A, that says, okay, now you're feeling this way, or you've been given this instruction, or it's that time of the week. That is the light comes on and you're like, it's behavior time. That's the A. Then the behavior gets described in such a way that it meets the dead man test and the stranger test. And then the consequence is outlined in a way that indicates how much of the behavior, how often, how long, whatever, I need to get how much consequence. Often in the case of getting a reinforcer. So we look at this example here. We have the antecedent, behavior, consequence. I'll give you a really concrete example of this. I'm going to say every week, not being specific, in the 7-day, in this particular, let's look at this from a stranger perspective. Every week means sometime between Sunday at 12:01 a.m. and Saturday at 11:59. That technically, in that 7-day period is what I'm leaving this wide open. I'm not getting any more specific, allowing really within the A, allowing for some flexibility. So I look at this, I say every week I will bow flex 3 times and walk 1 mile 3 times. So I can, technically speaking, this still fails the stranger test. What is Bowflex, right? I can actually have a supplement to that and say, this is my Bowflex routine. If you're not familiar, Bowflex is a brand of exercise equipment, and I happen to have one. And so 3 times during that week, I commit to using the Bowflex. It could be anytime. It could be Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It could be Monday, Thursday, Saturday. It could be any. I'm leaving that wide open. And walk 1 mile. That's a little bit more accurate. 3 times. So that's my exercise plan. I go back to what's going to happen if during the week I get this done. I will reward myself by watching an episode of Ted Lasso. You can tell this is a little old. I've already watched all the episodes of Ted Lasso, waiting for the next season to come out. The next show is supposed to do a new Ted Lasso. That's pretty exciting. But in this, I have every week, if I do the Bowflex 3 times during the week, I do the 1 mile walk during the week, I get to watch 1 episode. The willpower in this plan is not having to do with the Bowflex and walking miles. The willpower is I will not allow myself to watch Ted Lasso if I fail to do this. So it moves the willpower when it's me. It removes the willpower and says, there's under no circumstances will I watch an episode of Ted Lasso unless within the last 7 days I have done Bowflex 3 times and did a mile walk 3 times. That would be my plan. So this model, I'm asking you to use the same sort of graphic model to think about your behavior plans. Now, what this creates, and it gets a little, it can be a compound sentence, but it creates a single sentence that we call the behavior management plan. So I can say this all in one sentence, or maybe 2 sentences. Every week, I'm going to do my Bowflex routine 3 times and walk 1 mile 3 times, period. If I do so, referring to what I just said, I will reward myself the opportunity to watch Ted Lasso. Now, the fact that we can actually look at things outside, there was a time when television shows came on at a certain day at a certain time. I mean, I know that still happens, but most people are they watch those shows whenever they want. That has been a very big boon to behavior management, because I can actually access Ted Lasso videos anytime I want, and that is great. So here I have this really kind of comprehensive example of a behavior plan. Every week when I do these exercise things, I'm going to reward myself to watch an episode of Ted Lasso. I might even go as far as saying which day of the next week am I going to get my reward. Let's say I set aside T for Tuesday for Ted Lasso Day. Okay? So on Tuesday, I'm going to evaluate the week before, and if I have done all of these things, I will reward myself on that Tuesday. Other types of behavior plans might include a list of behaviors and a list of consequences. My actual behavior plan that I actually do for myself lists a number of different exercises that I can engage into, and I have to do any one of them once a day. And as long as I'm doing that, I can choose from a menu of options. As long as I have 7 days of choosing at least one exercise from a list of exercises every day, I can pick from a list of resources, watching television programs, reading books, doing stuff like that. So there's all kinds of ways that you can do this and still remain within that consistency of behavior management. Okay. Now, when we are in the process of managing the problem, we're trying to solve a problem. The problem that I'm trying to address with this plan is that I'm not exercising enough, not doing it to the level that I want. Now, first and foremost, we have to recognize that if we're not doing something, it means that we're doing something else that's reinforced. So if I'm not engaged in exercise behavior, I must be doing something else, and I'm prioritizing that. So we need to be able to keep that into consideration. We also need to keep into consideration, and this is going to come up for many of you. Now, if I walk a mile, I feel great. I can walk a mile, no problem. In fact, right now, my regular walk is about 3 miles. I'll walk for 3 miles. I come back. I'm feeling good about having done it, feeling good physically, blood's moving, and all that stuff. And I could actually put that, my consequence I feel good. The immediate consequence of me taking that walk is that I feel good. And I'm going to tell you that is not enough, because anything that you would like to do that in the past you recognize had made you feel so good, that feeling good, that losing weight, that, sunny disposition that you have is insufficient because if it was sufficient, you would still be doing that behavior. So often, the natural consequences of taking care of yourself, such as exercising and good food and stuff like that, it's just not sufficient to keep us from bad habits. It really, water, water, drinking water is a really, really essential part of good health. And I will drink soda. Sometimes I have drinks, those kinds of things. And every once in a while, I feel like having a water. And I'll take that water to be like, it's like my body just, drank the nectar from the gods. And I'm just, drinking like, wow, they should bottle this and sell it, kind of things. And it's so refreshing. It's so perfect. It's everything. And I wonder, why am I still drinking any soda or anything else besides this? Because despite the fact that water is so reinforcing to drink, still tending toward those other things to drink because of the qualities of them. Wow, Pepsi really can sometimes that quick sugar energy feels so good. And then an alcoholic beverage, for those of us who can drink, just is like, wow, I'm catching a buzz on this. I'm more socially comfortable. All of these things, those reinforcers are huge. They keep us moving toward those bad habits. So when we're designing consequences and we want to stick in there how good we're going to feel when we do this stuff, or what we're going to look like in that outfit and stuff like that, we have to avoid all that because those things had previously not worked. They haven't been sufficient. This is why creating a behavior plan that gives you tangible reinforcers is better. Then over time, when you start to reap the long-term benefits and the behavior becomes habitual, because the natural reinforcers are starting to act on those particular behaviors, you can let the behavior plan go. But be ready to re-implement it, because you might go into one of those A sections again and like, oh, I'm feeling really good drinking all that water, but as soon as I wasn't getting my Ted Lassos for it, my behavior dipped. So again, all the more reason to keep counting. You're always counting, you're documenting all of this. Okay, when we are evaluating whether a plan is working, we can look at things that we've done that prevent you from implementing the plan. One of these things, oftentimes we put reinforcers in there that we're not in direct control over. We have to be directly in control over the consequences if we are managing a plan about our own behavior. If we are managing a plan about somebody else's behavior, we need to be in control of the reinforcers. If, for instance, you're working with a kid who likes video games and you have video game usage as a reward for other behavior, then you have to make sure you're in charge of that person's access to video games. If that individual can still go to their friend's house and get all of their video game needs met, that reward may not work as effectively as you would like. You might look at the antecedents. When we examine the antecedents and we're looking at our behavior plan, is it clear enough when this is supposed to happen? Are there, let's say my walk days, let's say I had put specific days, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm going to go for a walk. Well, what if it's raining? I'll come to Maine, right? What if it's raining? Is that going to be, do I have an alternate plan to do something instead? Circumstances can then come around that don't allow us to do something, or life circumstances come along, changes in the availability of resources, whatnot. Do I have enough money? Do I still have cable? Do I still, all of these things, making sure that the antecedents are in line. The behavior descriptions, are they specific enough? I don't take the dead man's test and stranger test lightly. Some of you, when we did that specific assignment, You were talking about internal behaviors, like I'm going to change an attitude or I'm going to self-talk myself, which is fine when you're dealing with your own behavior. And that's kind of what cognitive behavior therapy is about. But it's very difficult to do that with somebody else when we can't directly observe those behaviors. So sometimes we have to look at what does that behavior produce, and how can we evidence that behavior so that we can count it. This leads back to that counting. If you're running a behavior plan that involves thinking a different way, you have a little notepad with you all day, and you're going to mark down every time you engage in that new behavior. In fact, you probably should mark down every time you fail to engage in that behavior, so you can kind of have what percentage of the times actually did the plan work or not work. The consequences have to be something you're willing first. If you're doing the program on yourself, then you have to be willing to put it on the line. You have to be willing to say to yourself, like I said, the only willpower is that you're not accessing the reinforcer unless you fulfill your end of the bargain. So if it's something that you're weak about and you're just going to go ahead, it's not going to work. It's not going to serve as a reinforcer if you can not do the plan and still get the reinforcer. It also has to be just like our pay. Our pay, what we get paid for, needs to be perceived of as equivalent to what we're giving to get paid. So your pay needs to be fair. It needs to be fair for the behavior that you're, asking for. If you're like, I'll give you a really good example. When I was a kid, I was best friends with John Babin, who was across the street from me. His parents owned the local store, Babin's Grocery Outlet, which is in Senegat and has now been sold, and it's called something else. So my childhood memories are all wrecked. But I would go over, and Clint Babin, who I actually recently had the opportunity to thank him personally for the work ethic that he instilled in me. Like, I wanted to hang around with John and stuff like that. John had work to do in the store, so he would put me to work. So there was a whole bunch of trees on his property, and they would get filled with junk that people threw away as they were leaving the store. About as much as I can remember about that. So I would get the task. I'd get a trash bag and have to go underneath all the trees and clear out and clean all that stuff out. I would do that for about an hour. Okay, maybe even longer if I got distracted. Go back in the store, throw the trash in there, and you know what he paid me? He paid me a popsicle. What? 1 hour? That is not right. That's not right. Now today, Clint was still running the store, and he told me to go clean out the. Actually, I'd probably do it for free because I owe him so much, but I probably wouldn't do it for a popsicle. So you have to make sure the pay is equivalent to the work that you're demanding within your plan. Okay, these things can be very simple. I gave you a very simple one. They can also be very complex. We have to make sure that the complexity matches the desire of the cognitive abilities and time of the individual. So, for example, my wife is currently on a diet, and the diet regimen that she's on has her tracking calories. And anybody who's ever engaged in that we know that when you start, it's all exciting. I'm tracking, got all this going. After about 4 days of tracking, you don't want to track anymore. It's a PIA. Who wants to do that? Every meal, you're like, I gotta take out, and even if you have an app, I had like My Fitness Pal, you can do that. Look, what a pain. What a pain. It would, and those kinds of, for me, that tracking of individual things like that is doesn't work for me. It's too much work for the reward that I'm getting. Now, I have an Apple Watch that tracks my steps, my heart rate. Whenever I'm engaged in an athletic kind of thing, there's like different, I can actually just very quickly go and say, I'm on an outdoor walk, or I'm going swimming, or I'm actually on my stationary bike and stuff like that. Track my thing. Does all that without. This is a genius invention for tracking specific things like that without requiring a whole lot of labor. So when you're examining your plans, watch out for complexity. It's one of the reasons those diet plans don't work. They're just too difficult to track. It takes up too much of your time. And then other aspects of the plan that are important is that when you're implementing a plan, you kind of have to get the whole team on board. So if you're working in a family or a school system or something like that, or a classroom, you kind of have to get everybody involved. In fact, when you're creating a plan for yourself, it may be very useful to actually work with your partner, your husband, wife, with your kids and whatever, and get them to be part of the plan. So I often tell moms, moms and dads, to say, like, let's put something really big as the reward, okay, that you're going to spend one-on-one time with your children. Now, that's a big one because it's good for your kids, and you don't want to be in a situation where you're restraining that. But get this, let's say you really want to change, you really want to drink water every day, and that's important. And you say that if I drink the water, I'm going to be able to I'm going to have a half hour exclusive one-on-one time with my child playing her favorite game, and then tell the child. And the child would be on your case to drink your water every day because you're accountable to that other person. Now, kids can weather a disappointment. They can do that. If you get to the end of the day and like, I didn't do it. And I've literally, with my own behavior, seen my children go, then you don't get to play with me today. And they're part of the plan. That is incredibly instructional, incredibly powerful type of reinforcement plan. The same with your spouse, the same with your partner, same with your coworkers, your classmates, your teachers, whatever. Having people accountable, just taking effective action using these plans. Very, very, very powerful ways to implement behavior plans. Okay, so we come to the assessments for this particular chapter. We have two discussions. The first one discussing why it is important to count your behavior throughout the whole thing, through the A, B process. Why are you counting? Why are you getting a baseline? Why are you counting through all that? Why are you counting through the evaluation? Even as you might be changing the A, B's, and C's to make your plan more effective, you're counting all the time. Talk about that. And with that, because that's sort of a generic answer, not really suitable for a discussion, but I want you each to express, when you talk about counting, talk about why that might be a challenge for you to count this behavior all the time. What's going to get in the way of that? What practical things and what solutions? What easy way of tracking? Like, I found a watch that tracks a bunch of stuff for me. I even have an app on here that will count. If, let's say I was counting, I use it for a particular exercise that I do for, well, I'll tell you, I play disc golf. So I'm practicing my short shots, which I'm not good at, like putting. So I'm practicing my putting. And what I'll do is I have the counter, and I'm going to practice various spots on my lawn, throwing the frisbee, until I get 30 in the basket. It might take me a long time to do that. So I have a little counter that just goes, it's on my watch, press 1, got that one. And I'm shooting, got another one, press 2. Using technology or using a pad of paper or whatever to help you. I could have used a little clicker, could have bought one of those, to count that behavior. But, creating a way. So in the discussion, I want you to talk about creative ways in which you can count your behavior. Now then, for Chapter 8 Discussion B, we're going to be reviewing, I'm going to review the special assignment, and you're going to post your tracking sheets. You're going to start identifying your behavior that you want to baseline and then subject to a behavior plan. And then how are you going to track that? Now, if you have decided to engage in a behavior that is private, then make up one for this particular assignment. Make up another one because I'm asking you to share it with the class. But it's going to be important now for us to look at the final assignment, because I think it's next week in the calendar, I say you have to start working on this. So start working on it now. Start working on the personal change project. Here it is in the course book. I'm asking you to identify a behavior in your own life, and you're going to go and make a behavior plan about it, and you're going to implement that plan, and you are going to evaluate that plan. So we start off here all about the ABC contingency plan. This is stuff you're learning in the class. This is a copy, actually, of the very similar assignment in the Introduction to Psychology class. So first we see here, as you can see my mouse here, design a plan. So we're going to put the A, B's, and C's together, and I go a little bit into the antecedents, behavior, and consequences. And these are the kind of the statements that you're going to come up with, the single statements. So every week I will go to the gym and do half hour of weights and half hour of cardio. If I do this for 4 weeks in a row, I will reward myself with a trip to the movies. That kind of single sentence actually describing what we had in that table. Okay? So here's the steps. We identify a problem. Okay, that's not your behavior. Okay, that's just the problem. Then we identify the behaviors. Let's say if you want to lose weight or exercise regularly, those are, these are consequences, basically. These are goals that you have. And then we well, how do I get there? How do I exercise regularly? How do I lose weight? Losing weight, and just, again, I have to tell you, if you can't, losing weight is a consequence of a lot of biological and behavioral processes. Your weight going down is not a behavior. It cannot be what you reinforce or punish, because everybody knows you go into a weight loss program, you can be on that weight loss program for a long time and not change, even gain weight. So you can't have the weight be the behavior. That is a measure of your body mass. That's not a behavior. What you're going to reward yourself with is the eating habits, exercise habits, sleep habits, whatever it is that you are actually doing and can measure. So you never use your weight as the behavior to reinforce your, it feels good, no doubt. If you do it, you lose 2 pounds, you're like, yeah, but that's not when you get your reward. You get your reward when you are consistent in the behavior that will ultimately, maybe over a very long time, result in the loss of weight. So important to remember that. Just go through here. Step 2, identify the behaviors and how often you want that behavior to happen. Then you're identifying consequences. Please read through all of these. It's a repeat of what we've been talking about in this class. Then you need to implement your plan. You need to actually do it. Actually put it in place. Get your accountability partners together. Tell everybody, post things on the fridge. You're going to be tracking your behavior. Make it gamify it with your kids or whatever. Maybe a bunch of you are just going to eat better. You could do this as a family. You could do this with your partner. It can, we're going to exercise together. And so you implement the plan, and then finally, you're going to evaluate the plan. Was it successful? Was it not successful? Did you have to change things along the way? Did you cheat? Were the rewards not strong enough? Those are just example questions to ask. So it's going to start off with this week. You're starting to put this together, and the first thing I want you to create to show me is your tracking sheet. How are you going to track the behavior? So what's due this week, you're going to be, this is a long-term project here, but what's due this week is you have to identify the behavior specifically that you're going to be doing, and it has to pass the dead man's test and the stranger test, and you have to create a document and or methodology under which you are going to track that behavior. How are you going to document it so you can get statistics out of it? You might put something on the fridge, you might use a spreadsheet, you might use an app, you might use whatever it is, but we're going to need to see that posted right in the discussion board. The more creative this is, the better. What you can draw from is the assignment we did on engaging games. If, for example, you are a Star Wars fan and you track your behavior with little R2D2 icons, it will be that much more reinforcing for you to do that. We are all children inside. We all like that kind of stuff, particularly if you're engaging with your kids and each one of them has their own way in which they're tracking how much water they're drinking or whatever. That can, maybe you have a race, maybe you have rabbits and who's going to get the most water, and you have those going around. That's what I want to see. But underneath that very reinforcing chart for everybody is actually a system of counting, so that you can actually go back into your plan and say, did I improve from my baseline? Now we know too, part of the reason why we're seeing such an increase in digital tools for tracking things like our heart rate, how many steps we take, is human beings like to do that. They don't like to do it manually. But boy, if at the end of the day, I can see how many miles I've walked, how many steps I've taken, whether I've done exercises, how many times, I'm going by my watch, the Apple Watch, did I stand up and walk around, or did I, sit in a chair all day? How much did I move around? There's a concept in the Apple world called closing your rings, and your rings. I'm gonna get it up here, make sure I get them all right. Your rings are made up of moving around. That's one of them. Exercise, and then standing. And the watch tracks all that for you. And when you complete a ring based on your goals, it vibrates and it like sparkles that ring right on your watch. How cool is that? It's just, and I can look past over days, look at the past days and stuff. We like doing that. It's very reinforcing, very rewarding when I don't have to work hard to track those things. So you're coming up with a way to track your behavior. That's what's due this week. I want you now, with this expectation this week, to start to review the special assignment and start gearing up to put that into place. I'm going to be asking you to share that information. This is a one-on-one time, you sending me stuff. What do you think about this? And me giving you advice on it. I'm going to work with I want to work with each one of you, so you have a really well-designed plan. You can start that at any time, but this is the first step. And to implement that plan to reduce a behavior that you have, I'll work with you on how to replace that behavior with something more positive, or to increase, or maybe even to create a behavior. Like I don't drink water at all. I don't exercise at all. I want to start doing that, and how you can create a plan to start that process and literally transform that part of your life using the most powerful psychological tools available to do that. So What a great opportunity built into this little class. All right. So that's it for this week. Have a great week. Start working on that plan. Start working on that special assignment, and send me questions. Send me direct questions through email. Just go ahead and do that, and I'll be ready to answer those questions to help you navigate the special assignment starting right now. So have a great week, and I'll see you online. Take care.